Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, the Best of ChefConf or ChefConf Highlights, hosted by the Chef Asia Pacific team. Thank you for your time and thank you for dialing in. I'll quickly go around the Zoom table here just so you know who is on the call, who the panelists are. We have Corey Scobie, who is Chef's CTO. We're doing a bunch of presenting today. John Weiss, who is our VP of Product, who will also be working with or helping Corey with some of the chef components of today. I have two special guests. We have Graham Weldon, who is a chef customer working at a company called Rakuten out of Japan, Tokyo, Japan, and Milan Brown, who's also with a chef customer, Westpac, New Zealand, based in New Zealand, obviously. My name's Paul Took. I'm the head of sales for Chef in the Asia Pacific region based here in Australia. And co-hosting with me today is Anthony Reese, who was our lead solution architect for Chef in the Asia Pacific region. Corey, do you mind putting up the first slide so people can start to see what we're going to be up to today? Thank you. Click through to the next one. So obviously today we're going to walk through a summary of what was announced at ChefConf, some of the, I guess, the ecosystem trends that we're seeing and are driving the kinds of product announcements that are coming out of Chef. We will then invite Graham and Milan to join the panel, talk about their use of Chef, the cultural things that they're doing in their organizations, and we'll then open up for a broader panel Q&A session where you as the attendees of today's webinar will be able to fire questions off directly at the panelists. Next slide, please, Corey, if you don't mind. Some interesting sessions. We'll share these slides with you after today's webinar. One of the things we have done in the background post ChefConf that I think is also relevant for today is pull together a summary with links to some of the more popular customer and partner presentations that were given at ChefConf a few weeks ago. Interestingly, one of them is from Graham, which is exciting, but we'll share these slides out with you and you can follow those links in your own time. Next slide, please, Corey. Some other housekeeping for you all. We have some upcoming workshops that are going to be held virtually and in the Asia Pacific time zone. So please make note of these dates. Anthony will be running some 1-hour workshops via Zoom to look at using Chef compliance across multi-cloud environments. We can talk a bit more about that later if you'd like us to. Otherwise, do keep an eye on those dates and the web page at the bottom of that slide where all the details for these workshops is found. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Corey to jump in and take over from here. Thanks, Corey.
Thanks, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it, and thanks for having me. I thought, we're going to go through a little bit of the content sort of in rapid fire that we went through at ChefConf. Obviously, a couple of days worth of content compressed into a relatively compact webinar here. I thought about the different approaches that I could possibly take here, and the way that I landed is that I'm going to give you a taste of how we presented the content, but also a little bit of the background commentary on how it went and how it landed at ChefConf, as well as being a recap. I've been following Andrew Cotter on Twitter, a big fan of the work that he's doing. I don't know if you know who Andrew Cotter is, but he's a Scottish football announcer, Scottish rugby announcer. And he's been doing this whole series with his dogs, Olive and Mabel, and I'm a big fan of that. So maybe there'll be a taste of that in here. I can't do a very good Andrew Cotter, by the way. We started off with I think what is becoming a seminal statement about Chef, and one of the reasons that we went through the exercise that we did last year before ChefConf in figuring out how to reconcile our open source roots with our aspirations as a software company was to land on this statement, which is the best way to build software is to do it in close collaboration with the people that use it. And for me and for us at Chef, I think that is emblematic of how we feel there's this synergistic relationship between Chef, between the community of people that also contribute to Chef as a software entity, and also between Chef and the practitioners, the world of people out there that are touched every day by using Chef's products and automation technology across the board. And so John, myself, others in the organization have been really championing this idea of let's do everything transparently and in the open and in collaboration with the end people who are actually the people whose lives are impacted by this. And I say that not lightly in terms of lives, because if I go on to the next slide, it talks about one of the key things that I think we brought to ChefConf this year. I spoke about it a little bit in the keynote. Barry Christ, our CEO, talked about it in his sort of opening remarks to start the conference. And this is really a focus on Chef's core purpose, which is to improve the lives of IT operators through software automation. This is a revamped version of our core purpose statement. This is why Chef exists as a company, and we've really tried to integrate that with all of our product strategy, our product planning, and ultimately with the way that we engage with customers and with users at large in the marketplace. And so I think that that's a really core element of the message that we delivered at ChefConf this year, which is that we recognize the persona of IT operators, and in particular, and I'll talk a little about this in a few slides, is the sub-personas that are emerging around security ops and around infrastructure operations and around application operations. And we're really focused on those operators as being the core users of Chef, and to really well fit the functionality that we bring to market with the kinds of jobs that they're trying to get done in their organizations. So you see on the right-hand side, there's a few other additional details here. We design products for how IT operators work. We try and make it easy to collaborate across IT roles, and at the core of this is our coded enterprise, or the idea that we use coded artifacts as a collaboration tool, and I'll dig into that a little more in a second. And then really, at the end of the day, it's how we can help you as customers, as practitioners, as users of Chef software, extend your work and the impact of your work across the enterprise. And I think, you know, when we had envisioned what would happen at ChefConf this spring, we couldn't possibly have grasped sort of the side effects that this year's global pandemic would have on work from home, on the ability for IT to have such a material impact on every business in the organization, and how digital transformation is at the forefront of everybody's survival strategy at this point. And so it really just doubles down on the idea that IT operators are the heartblood of the way that most modern companies work, and that we can, and that function and that organization can have a huge impact on the business as a whole. We have a really strong focus on compliance this year, and you're going to hear more from John about the exciting compliance announcements that we made at ChefConf this year. But really what we've tried to do this year is take all of the strong assets that we've been building for the past couple of years, started with Chef Inspect and the idea that you could encode security and compliance controls as actual software tests. We brought that to automate, to show that you could visualize the results of that across large fleets. We started by producing a pro forma set of Inspect audit profiles, and we really doubled down on that. And then ultimately, it's not just compliance and the ability to assess systems, but also the ability to remediate them as well. And so we've really tackled all of that at scale this year in bringing to market a very much a turnkey solution that allows you to take a fleet of compute and transform it into something that's security and compliant right from the get-go. And again, John is going to talk more about our compliance offering and the specifics of how we've brought those technologies together. But it's a continued evolution of building on the technology foundation that we've been developing at Chef for a number of years now, and bringing those together into even more specific and efficient workflows for IT operators. I talked a little earlier about the personas of IT operators and how it breaks down into infra ops and sec ops and app ops. One of the things that we have at the core philosophy of Chef as a company is that if you can express the end state of a system as code, you have a number of advantages. One is that you can, of course, automate that because you can build that into pipelines and other automation technology, which we do on a regular basis. But the second thing is it really gives you a foundation for collaboration across different functions in the enterprise. Take security ops as an example. I'm sure many people on this call and certainly many of Chef customers experience the idea that they get some kind of a non-functional document from some part of the organization that represents their security and compliance procedures and policies at an organization. And the challenge is that when you get that as a PDF document or a Word document or whatever unstructured format it is, it's very hard to make actionable. It's hard to assess. There's a lot of room for ambiguity in the subjective assessment of what the description of an actual policy means. And more importantly, you can't put it into any build pipeline to actually ensure that something is working in the way that you had intended. And so with SecOps as an example, and it's just an example because we do it in InfraOps and AppOps as well, when you take that codified and coded enterprise sort of mentality and you say, rather than express my security and compliance controls as a Word document or a PDF or some kind of unstructured metadata, instead, what I'm going to do is encode it in actual software tests that I can hand out to the organization. The software tests can be run in any environment. They can be run in development, they can be run in production, and they will tell us whether systems in fact comply or don't comply with the standards that we set forth. That's the way that you can really get leverage from the coded enterprise. Artifacts, which you can check into source control, you can version control and manage throughout their lifetime. And more importantly, you can share and collaborate across them because they are in fact code themselves. And so we've taken that fundamental example and spread it throughout all of the automation facets of our enterprise automation stack, including security, including app ops with habitat and plan files, which really define the artifact of an application and its dependencies. And then of course with the infra ops in chef cookbooks and recipes and all the goodness that we've been doing for over a decade. So that's one of the key themes that we have, is this idea of collaboration through code, which is a common language that people can share across multiple functions in the organization. And then the last concept that I want to touch on is just this idea of a single path to production. And that may be a little bit hyperbolic, which is that a single path may not be in fact achievable across large scale enterprises that have many different organizational facets to the enterprise. But what we are experiencing now in this current generation of DevOps, sort of the V2 or V1.5, whatever you want to call it, the sort of the next generation of DevOps, is that there's been a lot of democratization that's gone on in the enterprise over the course of the last 5 to 10 years. That democratization has resulted in agility for teams to choose a bunch of different technologies and to then operationalize those technologies in the way that was best fit for those teams. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as those projects mature and move into IT operations, custodianship and management over the long term, the vast number of patterns that many enterprises have, they're experiencing a tremendous amount of technology overhead and drag from that. And what we see when we look at the right side of the diagram here is the highest performing organizations, despite the fact that they have a large degree of latitude over the technologies that they choose and the patterns that they choose to develop applications and workflows and pipelines, et cetera, what they find is that they narrow to a very small number of patterns that they can then operationalize at scale. If you look at the highest performing digital leaders like the Facebooks and the Googles and the Netflixes of the world, they have a very small number of ways that they are actually operationalizing the output of tens of thousands of developers and pizza teams across their organizations. And so really what we are trying to do at Chef is to provide the constructs, the basis through those coded artifacts to be able to narrow the number of paths to production, to be able to canonicalize the way that you take something out of software development and then operationalize it at scale in the enterprise with all the enterprise characteristics that you need: resiliency and redundancy and failover and change control, et cetera. And so ultimately, at the end of the day, if you think about, as you look at Chef's portfolio and as John digs into the next section with some of our exciting product announcements, think about that as you reflect upon your own organization. How can you use automation technology to try and narrow the number of paths to production and get more leverage from the assets that you're actually operationalizing in your IT organization? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Weiss, our VP of Product, who's going to take us through some of the super exciting product announcements that we landed at ChefConf.
Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm coming to you from Seattle, Washington. Really excited to be with the APAC team. Always a lot of fun. And Corey is my boss, and we're just the warm-up act, though. The good part you're coming up, which is I think Graham and Milan. I'm looking forward to hearing from our customers. They have a lot of great things to say. You're going to get your money's worth tonight because I've got to go through a whole bunch of stuff in about 6 or 8 minutes. So I'm going to go pretty quick, but we're going to, all kinds of follow-ups. I know your local team would love to give you follow-up deep dive presentations, but this will give you the quick survey across the top of everything that we've been sort of announcing here and what's that. So with that, next slide, please. This is just the orientation. So where we're really focused now is making the lives of IT operators that Corey talked about, the direct workload owners in enterprise easier, trying to anticipate what's the workflow they need, what's the data services, what's the enterprise integrations they need. As you know, Chef has been really focused on sort of the coders, the builders, the developers who then are sort of our proxy in serving the other roles in the enterprise. And we continue to broaden our capabilities for those builders. You'll see some things coming up that's like making your life easier to code and test and everything else. We're not letting up on that at all. But at the same time, you know that if you've been in that role, you've had to do a bunch of other stuff you probably didn't want to have to do to make it really work for your workload owners. And what we're trying to do is take more of that burden for you to make the innovation that we've come up with in conjunction with the chef community much more easily digestible at scale to the enterprise. So serving those needs. Next slide, please. And so this is the one slide overview of everything that we just recently came out with, and we would love for you to give it, a test drive yourself and give us ongoing feedback. But the first two are brand new offers. And if you are familiar with the technology components of the Chef stack, infra, inspect, habitat, all that, right? They're still there. Where this isn't a V1, they all still work. They're very mature components. They're very scalable. What we've done is compose those into workload offerings that are really suited to purpose, that are oriented toward a customer outcome, right? So the first one is, I'll talk to you about Chef Compliance. We actually have a couple different variations of that offer. Chef Desktop, which is something that our community had actually been doing, and they asked us to productize it and make it more polished and so forth. Application delivery enhancements. This is the what you know and love as Habitat. If you're familiar with that, we've continued to innovate there. And then a really cool thing for developers, the Chef Workstation now has a really cool thing called Upgrade Lab I'll tell you about. And lastly, to help you with a lot of IT integration, we have our second and really cool ServiceNow integration that I'd love to tell you about. So with that, I'll get right into it. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll go right on to into this. So Chef Compliance is really not anything new. It's a new reason that people want to use our technology to achieve intended state, right? So I don't know about you, but if you saw something like, I think Reezy sent me the note about the New South Wales School District getting hacked the other day, right? That just kind of makes my blood boil, right? I want to give them a solution that allows them to really make sure that they can easily, identify any vulnerabilities and conform their estate to its intended configuration, right? But it's been hard in the past, and what we're trying to do is just make it a lot easier by making it more policy-driven, and also provide you with a lot of the content that you need right out of the box, right? That you can easily tweak and customize to your specific standards. So this wheel on the right is really a mental model that is something that we would encourage you to kind of dive into. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see us kind of try to break that down real quick. So if we start in the upper right-hand corner where the purple acquire phase is, that means get your content, set your policies, right? Where are you going to get? Are you going to write cookbooks from scratch? Are you going to get them from the community? You found something on GitHub. If you've been using Automate, you have, I think now over 400 different profiles in there to choose from. Some are certified with one authority or another. That's great. What we decided to do with our compliance offering is give you kind of a next generation of really hardened content with a secure chain of custody around it, where we've gone and gotten it certified upstream by authorities and made it easier for you to customize without writing any code. So this is kind of like mind-blowing. People who've been spending hundreds of hours tweaking and authoring cookbooks, there'll probably still be some cases where there is a need for that, but in this case what we want to do is give you as much out-of-the-box content for common especially high-value systems you have in your data center or cloud as possible, and offer that to you through a SaaS-based delivery mechanism. So second, you go to the gold piece, define, and this is where you get to go in and define your own standards. I was speaking with an investment bank yesterday, and they have their own kind of internal code names for what they think of as a standard, and it has heritage upstream from something like a STIG or a CIS profile, but they've made it their own, right? And so this is really, very similar to what you see with the Australian Cybersecurity Centre publishing the Information Security Manual, right? That's a framework that organizations can use to say, we want you to be able to secure your environment in a certain way. But as Corey noted before, that is provided to you in a PDF or an XML document, right? It's not a running artifact. So what you can do is you can actually take our profiles and essentially adapt them to either convert or simply map it to what we have, and cut down on kind of how much work you have to do to think about applying to a given standard that you have locally, or you want to apply within your own corporation. So detect is what you know and love as inspect. It runs out, it scans the endpoints, and we determine what the variation from intended state is. And you can just stop there, right? Or you can actually remediate it. And here's the cool thing about the new content is we're providing you both the scanning and the remediation capability for all of the controls built in this new framework. So that's pretty mind-blowing as well. So, and then lastly, you report that to the relevant parties who do corporate governance and information security and so forth. So we're trying to make this wheel easier for you to traverse and customize to your needs, and allow things such as, if you notice in the gold section, the ability to apply waivers to say, look, these are test boxes, or I got to run this app and I know it's a little bit transgressive to my policies, but I'm going to allow it. But also manage that waiver data, so you have you keep an eye on it, you have a record of it, you have an expiration date, you can routinely sort of give your vendor some trouble about that. So next slide, please. I'll try to pick it up here because I know we're short on time, but this is sort of in concept what we're trying to enable for you, which is those differentiated workload owners that you see on the left that Corey touched on, the app dev teams, the infrastructure operation teams, security teams. We want to allow them to converge on a common language, if you will, a common set, a common artifact that says this is what we have agreed upon is encoded in an immutable artifact, our intended state, right? And it's policy driven. And we can actually inject that into what we call the human free zone, which is effectively where nobody gets to touch it, right? There's no opportunity for malfeasance or human error. The code never lies. The code is always right. It does exactly what you say it does, so it's very inspectable. And that can be stored in an artifact store and used across your fleet. So next slide. And so I'll get right to it. This is the new compliance offer that we have available for you now. It's split into two kind of if you will, a junior and a senior capability. The one on the left is really just the ability to just do the audit, right? And that may be, in terms of capability maturity, what you want to aspire to next as a realistic goal, which is I want to be able to walk in and tell my CISO, we know the state of all of our important assets in terms of their conformance with our compliance policy or how much variation we have, right? That may be your goal. Or if you have another configuration management tool, maybe you're using Salt or Puppet in some areas or what have you, right? Ansible. That's okay too. You may want to just use Chef to do the auditing, and we'll help you with that. On the other hand, if you want to go to remediating those assets, not only remediating them, but keeping them from configuration drift, so continuing to look for any drift and addressing that, we have a senior or premium offer that is more suitable to, we give you the content as well for that. So again, on the right, it's just a reminder that those components you know and love are all really underneath these capabilities. So your learning curve is very easy if you know those components, and they are very hardened and tested. And at the bottom, that's just trying to illustrate that we're offering a subscription service to this level of content so we can continue to serve you with an SLA, because those things will be updated and changed and whatnot. Most of those are right now CIS, but we have STIG profiles. We also are in the future looking at different, widening that to different standards, but they can be also adapted with the help of your local team there to any local policies that you have. So next slide. And we'll go straight on here to the next one, which is really, I'd love to introduce you to, in just a minute here, the new Chef Desktop offer. And this is really taking, again, the same components that we've, really worked with the community to evolve over the years that do configuration management on endpoints, and actually offer a zero-touch provisioning solution for, which is really heterogeneous, right? So Windows, Linux, any version of Linux you can think of pretty much, as well as Macs, right? So we have also content available for that, also in a policy-driven format. So you can really, your entry point for controlling that is also can be data serialization or simple YAML, as opposed to having to write a bunch of code, right? So, and we've got it's a screenshot of some of the really cool analytics we give you with that as well. As Corey noted, we had no idea, obviously, that this was going to become so critical to enterprises being able to support all their knowledge workers who are like me and working from home and not even really on VPN, and I need some kind of ability to make sure that my endpoint meets compliance capabilities. So next is this is just kind of the top line, which is we're trying to drive massive efficiency with automation to the desktop. That approach that maybe you've pioneered in your organizations with the data center or with some of your high valued assets, and you see customers managing literally hundreds of thousands of assets with a really small team, why not apply it to desktop if that's an approach that you find valuable, right? And then also in the process, have a consistent way of assessing your compliance risk and status. So next, this is just a quick overview of some of the early enthusiasts who have actually helped us refine this offer. I think at ChefConf we even had Louis from Uber come in, and he was all excited. He put his chef hoodie on, and he kind of talked about how much they're managing, tens and thousands of endpoints in cars and restaurants and everything else with this offer that is based on our desktop technology. Facebook, which is over 500,000 endpoints doing the same thing. So this is a very scalable capability. The reason our logo's up there is our own IT manager, John McCrae. He actually ended up big surprise. We're managing our own desktops with this as well. So this is an approach you can take if you want to do that. So next, this is just a really quick intro of the capabilities as they're bifurcated according to the two different offers. On the left, we've got your plain Jane, just let me do configuration management. That does include provisioning as well. And on the right, we have the full meal deal compliance offer that allows you to also do auditing of those endpoints and reporting their compliance status. Again, backed up by a content subscription capability. So next here, we're kind of in the home stretch, but let's go to the next one. So if you're using Habitat, or if you've experimented with this, maybe you've done a POC, you know that this is our application delivery capability. I'll just real quick touch on these. This wasn't really the star of the show at ChefConf because it's not a new offer. It's something existing that we're just continuing to improve. We have a release pretty much every month, but we have some real-time health check messages. We now support secure Docker containers and layered containers in conjunction with Builda, if you're familiar with that. We now have one button kind of rollback. In the past, you may have had to kind of MacGyver that. Is that a word in Australia? Basically, you had to kind of wire it up yourself. Now customers have said, could you just make it easy for us to just do one-touch rollback, and we do that, and use TOML files to manage package settings. So if you're a fan there, we have some goodies for you. Next is, this one is a love letter to our developers and deep expert practitioners, which is, you may know that Chef Workstation is the kind of collection of all of our developer tools on a given, workstation, where you can actually do all of the CLI and all of the work you need to do to control Chef artifacts. Well, one of the pain points that our customers have told us about is, look, when I need to go to a new version of Chef, like we just released Chef 16, maybe you're on 12 or 13, you're going to 15, you're not, or wherever you are, you need to actually go through and kind of do some manual tweaking and testing of your existing inventory of cookbooks to make sure that they need to be updated, how they need to work, right? And so what we've got is this way of pointing at a whole bunch of them and just allowing us to auto-detect and auto-correct almost any problem. A customer was telling us the other day that they had tens of thousands of them. They pointed this thing at them, pushed a button, and in 2 hours they had 87% of them completely linted and updated, ready to go into production with no touch. And there was some others that had messages that we wanted you to look at and make a decision. So this is really cool for those of you who have ever had to deal with upgrading. We want to make that easy. And next, I just have 2 more slides for you. So this one is really just a reminder that we just recently released Chef 16, the infra client, and it's got 3 cool things in it. One is we now are offering YAML as a easier on-ramp to do some basic settings and configuration. Maybe you've got some data center operators or some folks who aren't Ruby experts. They can do something there. Of course, we're still committed to the power and complexity of the procedural logic in Ruby, but this will kind of welcome more IT personas into our ecosystem. We have a thing called unified mode, which I don't think I have time to describe, but I'll just say it's cool. And platform support, we have now support for ARM. So if you're familiar with Graviton, which is essentially Amazon EC2 instance that allows you to run on these incredibly power efficient processors, then you can do that as well. So next, lastly, I just have this is our, one more thing that I think you're going to love if you're a ServiceNow shop, which is a lot of companies now these days. So you may be familiar that we already have one integration in the ServiceNow store. We have had one for about a year now that is actually integrating to the service management or event management function of ServiceNow, where you can say, look, if I get chef run failures or something else, I want them to be injected automatically into the ITSM incident flow. Maybe you need that for ITIL compliance or what have you. So this is a second integration, and again, it's free, as the first one was, which is you go to the ServiceNow store and just download it. And we do have a lot of documentation for you on our website. But what this allows you to do is learn about the state of your fleet from everything that ServiceNow's discovery algorithms know. If you want to load those in through Knife, you can. But kind of the other cool thing is we will actually enrich the CMDB, the configuration management database on the ServiceNow side, with everything we know about what's happening on the chef side. So chef runs, automation failures, anything that happens, as well as all the OHI data. So all the cool stuff that we learn, the details that we learn about an endpoint, we will associate that with the correct CI or configuration item in the CMDB. Why do you care about that? Well, all of your ServiceNow operators are going to love you now, because if they're in any of their apps, and they have dozens of apps now, they don't have to do any kind of swivel chair or dual screen to go look in some chef tool or look in Automate and figure out what's going on. They will see everything that we know directly in their tools, because their tools know how to read their own CMDB, obviously, right? So with that, this is just a recap. Last slide, and then we'll get to the good stuff, which is, we have the compliance offer now, we have the desktop offer. We're continuing to kind of polish the Habitat capability for application delivery. We've got that upgrade lab that is just, it's one of those things that's like magic, which is very pleasing, and then also the ServiceNow integration that is free for you. So that's our announcements.
John, thank you. And Corey also, thank you. Corey, did you want to add anything to what John has said?
No, I mean, this is just really the highlights. There's a lot more content online at chefconf.io as well that goes into the details, the gory details of all of the work that we've done, of course, in the last year. But really, this is sort of the top level headlines, and super excited about compliance offering and about the desktop offering as well. So.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Corey. Thanks again, John and Corey. That was great. Anthony, did you have anything that you wanted to add in 60 seconds or less to give it an APAC bent?
60 seconds or less. Wow. I just wanted to sort of touch on what John mentioned in terms of the information security manual that we've put together as well. So as well as the chef compliance and chef remediation that both Corey and John talked about, we also have templated profiles as well, for example, for the Australian government information security manual. We've also looked at the Singapore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore as well. We have templated examples for that. And they're all leveraging behind the scenes the Certified Center for Internet Security Inspect profiles. So they're all built and they're based on and they inherit from industry best practices and those patterns. And I think that's an important thing to call out. And I'm glad John touched on that one, because that can, of course, be extended to other cybersecurity standards such as APRA or the Signals Directorate, etc. That's my 60 seconds.
Well done. You did well. 43 seconds exactly.
Thank you.
So let's bring Graham and Milan into the fray now. I might start with you, Graham. Do you want to introduce yourself and maybe talk about some of the work you've been doing with Chef in your time at Rakuten, but also how is this everything as code approach influencing the work you do and the types of decisions that Rakuten are making as a technology company?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Graham. I think people in the chef community might have known me for a few years now. I've been working at Rakuten for 8 years in various different capacities. And what I tend to get involved in is improving and expanding the reach of automation in all kinds of fields. Initially, it worked on our SaaS deployment solutions, and then breach out into general operations, and then starting to touch on application automation more recently. And I tend to touch on global reaching projects, stuff that spans data centers and clouds. So it's constantly complicated, but fun to work with. We've, I guess, from the early days, when Rakuten started taking on English-speaking employees, is kind of when I came on board. We were adopting code approach stuff pretty quickly, and we were using Chef from the get-go. We were deploying our platform as a service exclusively with Chef. What that did for us initially was separated us from most of the company because they were a very traditional environment, deploying things manually with runbooks. But that approach has changed over the last 8 years, and we've seen people move more towards an automated approach. What it generally has done for us is allowed us to share, and it's not easy all the time, but in some cases it allows us to compete internally for the best approach with code, which is actually a really interesting mechanic that I don't think a lot of people talk about. Internally, we fight over, for example, the best way to package and distribute and configure Nginx, and every now and then different teams will win, and that's a good thing. Variety and competing setups is actually good for innovation. Most recently, what we've done is started down a path of implementing compliance scanning in our own special little way by using the Chef toolsets. What that has allowed us to do is consolidate a bunch of existing cookbooks and bits of code from different groups, different siloed groups, to bring them together, separate out the stuff that we can source from existing profiles and community profiles. So simplify our stacks and merge together and bring these people together into one sort of collaborative group, even though they are separate groups. So with a large company like Rakuten, and one that has traditional sort of workflows, it's taken some time, but definitely the right attitude and the right tools have helped us, I think, become better teams.
What about from a collaboration perspective, Graham? What have you seen in him, given you've got technologies that allow for it and friendly competition between teams, has that produced better collaboration in the end?
It's on and off, the collaboration, in terms of whether or not it's productive or not. Sometimes it generates splits. Sometimes it generates good code competition. You got to find the balance there, and so there needs to be someone that can oversee these things and make sure that people are working towards the right objective and don't split off again. And I think that through a bit of training and a bit of learning over the past instances of this through the company, we've learnt to push this into a productive competition rather than destructive. Yeah.
Cool. And so what are Rakuten's automation goals for the next sort of 12 to 24 months, and what does Chef fit into that?
So I guess from the infrastructure side, we've always pushed automation, and from our images right through to deployment and setup, we use Chef almost exclusively. It is by far the most common tool being used throughout the company and all of its data centers. And that's been an easy adaptation. Over the years, it's been very easy to sell people on it and very easy to get people using existing resources and getting sped up. Where I guess it's lagged behind has been on both ends of that infrastructure. On the application side, each application team definitely has their own way of doing things, and that means that we can't share a lot of skills. And on heading down the stack, down to storage and network infrastructure, that has been very, very difficult to collaborate on the same sets of technology. What has happened most recently is that we've made internal changes and decisions to centralize our network infrastructure with a goal of rebuilding to be fully automated for deployments. We have particular strategies to roll out data centers on extremely short timelines due to the scale that we're expecting, and that we're actually seeing through the recent months. The last 6 months, to be honest, has been very positive for online shopping. Due to that growth, we have a requirement and a necessity to roll out micro data centers. These data centers need to be fully automated in terms of their network infrastructure setup. We need to be doing internal BGP everywhere, and we don't want human interaction unless it's something as simple as plugging in a keyed USB key somewhere to kick something off. Right, there might be a physical requirement there, but that's it. That's the one touch that we want. So that is being done primarily with Chef. We've made a switch to technology like Cumulus to allow us to be more flexible and be more portable on the systems that we use to white box things and get costs down. But also, while we're doing it, we're borrowing code from the infrastructure side to help with that network infrastructure deployment. One of the pieces that has surprised me with the ease of adoption here has been the recent implementation of InSpec for compliance. Generally, we want infrastructure to be compliant. We want to make sure that we're aware and have visibility into the issues that we do have. And on the network infrastructure side, as it's building out, and on the infrastructure side itself, server infrastructure, people are adopting that very, very easily. And I think what's really driven that has been the effortless approach and the use of Habitat to roll those out. We're able to demonstrate within a couple of days to a bunch of different teams, pushing stuff out to bare metal, to VMs and different operating systems, all collaborating off, all working off the one artifact, which was, there's no barriers for adoption there, and that's great. There's no friction at all from people for including this and getting that as part of the stack.
Cool, thank you, Graham. I might bring Milan into the conversation now. Milan, how are you?
Good, thanks.
You've been very patient. So, mate, where does automation fit into the work you and the Westpac New Zealand teams are doing today?
I mean, automation fits into, it aligns a lot with our culture as well. I sort of wanted to talk a little bit about the cultural journey Westpac's been on. They've been at it for several years. Davi, great CAO, came in here and really sort of transformed that out. I've only been here for about a year, so I've been part of it recently, but I've known about this one for quite a while. A couple of the guys that worked here from Chef went to the company I worked with in Switzerland afterwards. So that's kind of how I got introduced to what Westpac was all about and their chef journey, and how chef was actually quite central. From, you have Davi driving that cultural thing, but how do you align that with technology, right? Chef was really central to what they were trying to deliver, and help the teams move really fast from that application delivery point of view, getting it out there in front of the users as quickly as possible. And it's been really successful, right? Things have changed.
What does that success look like?
There's different elements of it, right? There's some of our stuff that's quite old, and we're a bank, got dozens of years of tech sitting here, right? So we've got old mainframes and stuff like that, but we've also got some real modern mobile apps and other things like that. You know, and now we have the regulators to deal with as well. I think that's an interesting one, and new CAO. So it was quite interesting to hear from Corey around the sort of what's next generation DevOps, I guess, because, you know, that is something we're looking at, and there's kind of bit of drive at the moment to look where we go next, as well as the way the regulators are kind of.
What are the factors that you're seeing as important factors for that next generation of DevOps?
It's how we leverage public cloud is a big one. I think we've been predominantly an on-prem place, done a lot of work in that space, but we're getting to a point where we kind of see the public cloud as, you know, the way to really move a lot faster. And, you know, it's what tools we sort of use to do that it's interesting. I think the one thing Chef with Terraform is truly better. That's one thing we're really finding. Those two things together really help us get us going.
Okay. And how are you tackling the regulators in that context?
Well, they're the regulator one. I mean, what we've really found is Inspec's really helping us, right? It really helps us become more compliant. I think as we leverage more and more public cloud, and teams they have that flexibility, sort of to choose more and more different technologies to actually put into their applications and move even faster. Sort of using Inspec to put all those controls in place and check those checks, so that when audit comes along, it's a little bit easier. It's like, I'll just go look over there. It makes it a lot more. It reduces our effort immensely.
Yeah, right, cool.
You know, and at the same time, I guess one of the things, Corey, I mean, on one of your slides, I really liked it, which was the best way to build software is close collaboration with the people, right, who use it. We've been sort of evolving the way we look and bringing more and more of our different skill sets into single squads. So now we have squads with marketing, technical people, marketing and product people all in the same squads nowadays. That means that we can really sort of be close to what we're trying to build for our customers.
Yeah, cool. Westpac New Zealand have been at the forefront of a lot of that for a while now. All right. So I might throw to the floor. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Milan, for your insights. Sorry, we don't have a lot of time. I might throw to the floor now to see if anyone would like to ask any of the panelists a question or two. There is a Q&A tab that you can click on to type your questions in. So please start typing if you've got them.
I've got a question for Graham and Milan as well. We're waiting on people to type.
Yeah.
So probably Graham, if you want to answer first, and then Milan, you can come in next. But gentlemen, you've both been on the automation journey for quite some time with your respective organizations. We have a number of attendees who are just beginning their automation journey. What advice, Graham and Milan, do you have for people that have started that automation journey with Chef, and how do they get started? How do they get people enthusiastic about it? What do your organizations respectively do to encourage that thinking?
That's tricky.
That's why I started with you, Graham.
Yeah, damn it. Look, I think that primarily we're dealing with engineers, and engineers of all different skill levels and experience like to know exactly what's going on. They have trouble adopting technologies and solutions where things feel like a black box. I think the easiest way to get started is to demonstrate with people how quickly and easily you can build up a system from scratch using a from scratch cookbook in Chef, for example. This is how you build up a web server, or this is how you build up a, a JBoss server or something. Once showing them through that, it's a staged approach to get them onto the most productive path. Once they're comfortable with those basics, and show them that this can produce the exact same system that you're deploying today, start introducing them to things like community cookbooks. Say, yeah, I know we built out that web server, we did it ourselves, and that was great, but we can accelerate the time we have by using these community resources and adopting those. And if you take them through that journey of learning themselves and then easing them into existing resources and then compounding that with more complex resources for their full deployment stack, it becomes an easy thing for them to adopt.
Oh, that's good, Graham. And I guess you're showcasing the working software at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. At the end of every stage, there should be something functional that you can demonstrate, put in front of someone and say, this is essentially this is a production-ready thing that we've just produced.
Yeah, perfect. Milan, how does Westpac do it? How do you encourage everyone?
I think, Westpac, me personally, it's always about starting small. Right? So start small. Don't say, hey, we're going to do Chef and expect 100 engineers to get going straight away. It's fine. Your sort of pioneer engineers that are really keen is one thing. Right? Get them up and going with it. Find a few things that are really going to help. Look for, I always go back to lean, identify forms of waste that we can automate, look at that sort of stuff and say, right, let's automate this one little thing, see what kind of improvement we can get on it, and build out from there slowly. And it's the same. So when you go back to the individuals with the tools, it's how you get those pioneers to bring the other people on that journey with them. It's a very coaching mentality that I have, and we're truly trying to adopt. So we spend a lot of time at sharing and learning at Westpac. So,
do you use a community of practice-based model, Milan?
Yeah, one of the guys who's on the call, Peter Crotty, he's sitting right next to me there. he's one of, especially around Chef, he's one of our leaders, and spends a lot of time on community practice, really promoting it and how we can always move faster.
That's great advice. Thank you, Milan. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks, guys. We've got a couple of questions here in the Q&A panel. The first is, are there demos available for APAC customers with compliance with respect to things like the Australian ISM and the MAS TRM up in Singapore? Anthony, can you talk to that one?
Absolutely. We can definitely demonstrate things like the information security manual from the Australian government. That's a demonstratable profile. In fact, I haven't had time, but I'm going to put together a YouTube video so that people can watch it whenever they feel like. Monetary Authority of Singapore, yes, we have a demonstratable profile as well, able to do that. As I mentioned earlier, they all are based on Centre for Internet Security certified inspect profiles as well. So they're using a known best practice.
Cool, thanks, Anthony. I've got a couple more questions. I've got one. Here we go. Oh gosh, they're starting to fly through. Question to Graham: what kind of use cases are you leveraging for Habitat, and are product developers embracing packaging to Habitat?
Good question. I am trying to put everything I can into Habitat right now. I've said, I think for the last year and a half or so, that I think the way Habitat approaches packaging is the future of packaging. Are product developers embracing packaging with Habitat? That's difficult to answer. Some are, some aren't, and I think it comes back to limiting how you introduce the benefits of Habitat to that particular application developer. Habitat does so many things, and I think that's, for me, why it was hard to pick up initially. It does so many things, but you need to look at what are the problems that they're having, and why would Habitats work for them? What particular things would it solve? In the case of one particular group, they were deploying to public cloud and to on-premise, and they were looking at two different versions of operating systems. So in that particular example, Habitat removed the operating system as a consideration altogether. And we did that with a practical demonstration. We took their exact images for on-premise and for public cloud and showed them deploying from a single artifact. Another group had legacy applications coming in and being merged into one sort of meta project where they had different release pipelines. And so rather than trying to merge all of them together, we said this is an opportunity to revive, or not revive, but rebuild on the kind of approaches that you want to use. And we focused on demonstrating them the package promotion capabilities and automatic updates out onto Habitat supervisors. On one that is close to my heart, they were having problems with deploying configurations to multiple data centers. So again, we focused on a single feature, the networked Habitat supervisor, and being able to inject a configuration into the ring and allow it to roll out to all the nodes. Habitat is so complicated, but each individual feature is rather simple and has relevance to different teams. So focusing on those has been key in getting people to adapt and adopt Habitat. I've got this future vision of, a year, maybe 2 years down the track. Imagine having all of Rakuten using one process for building software, so that doesn't matter who you're talking to. It's like, hey, this is how we build. Our artifact is over there. Deploy it somewhere. I don't care where. It's just a Habitat artifact. Don't worry about it.
Graham, you're speaking to my slide now. My one path to production slide, right? I think it's the perfect voiceover for that. Maybe I'll steal your vision in the next iteration of that.
Steal the soundbite. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Graham, and thank you to Matthew Donaldson for the question. We will get through all the questions, so let's keep moving. I have a question here in the chat area from Darren Reed. Darren, I think your question is actually directed to Milan, who's at Westpac New Zealand. May I ask, what was the biggest return that automation delivered for Westpac?
Speed, ultimately, right? Speed, ability to change. Release times were down. All of those usual things. I think a lot of it was also collaboration as we sort of were able to grow the tools. I think now we have probably about 120 technology teams in reality delivering tech, distributed and operating reasonably autonomously. We have elements where they can go out and try new stuff all the time. But when it comes down to it, it's, a lot of it's about meeting controls as a bank. How do these tools actually help us meet the controls, and why people should use them is some of the stuff. It makes it easy for others to move faster.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you, Milan, and thank you to Darren for the question. Actually, sorry, one more question from Milan here. Cost savings also a driver, Milan?
Nah, well, personally, no. Sometimes the bank, depends on the time of the year, financial reporting a little bit, but I'm always one to sort of argue we'll get them if we do this the right way. Yeah. And we've proven that recently many times over. I think we've been doing some work around our automation, stuff like that, where just by ensuring we've got more compliance, we saved 600,000 in a month type thing.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Milan. I'll keep moving to the questions. This one's from Hazim. Hazim says that his group is one of the new adopters of automation. One of the risks we're concerned about is drift between code and actual infrastructure. We think that preventing privileged access to infrastructure will prevent drift, but it might cripple the engineers. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I do.
I'll start with that, which is that this is a little of what John talked about in the human-free zone in the concept of automation, right? Which is that you want to really make your changes ultimately in controlled version managed source code, and then ultimately have those changes then flow through into the production environment. The most efficient and effective IT organizations have absolutely limited human access to systems in production environments, and force all of their changes through a code managed change control process. And I think, Graham, you were talking about that with your micro data centers too, as right. Well, which is like nobody's allowed to go in and touch some stuff. You just get to go in and like kick off the automation process, yeah. Right?
Yeah. So, and also following the latest sort of things we're seeing is this idea of zero trust in computing, which is you should do all the things that Corey described, right? And also, we should have the ability to certify in production that it really is that way and that it stays that way, right? And even if your configuration doesn't drift, keep in mind this interesting tidbit. Your policies may drift, right? You're going to update your compliance policies. There's a new level 2 profile that comes out that illustrates best practices for securing, Oracle 12 or what have you, right? And now your artifacts, which are driving into the state, are correct. They're not doing anything wrong. But now I've got to make sure that they adapt to the new and evolved compliance posture. So we've got that to chase as well. So basically, the summary is do all the things to make sure that you've got that human-free automation zone and you've got the ability to drive changes from an artifact store through the kind of artifacts Corey described, and also in production be able to prove that they really are that way and that they stay that way, right? And lastly, that they follow your evolving compliance policies, right?
Some of the issues that I see come across in an environment that we're providing is that we essentially provide a bare metal service that's sitting on top of this automated network infrastructure that I talk about, where at the end of the day, we need to hand over a bare metal instance that's provisioned and compliant and ready to use to a developer that's outside of the sort of core infrastructure section. And they want full control, they want full root access. So we got this two fighting sides of we want compliance, we want a strict profile, we're not versioned, but we want to give them root access. They can't log in as root, but they should be able to escalate and do things as root as they like. So I think if you're a new adopter of automation and you want to prevent drift but not cripple engineers, your biggest win will be visibility. If you can define your compliance, define all of the rules that make your service compliant and be aware when they fall out of compliance, you can start doing things like one of the cases we have, we are going to basically notify a service owner, a server owner, when they're out of compliance. And if it goes beyond a certain threshold of days, their network access will be revoked. Right? So they're responsible. We define the policies, but they have full root access to do everything else that they want, as long as it stays compliant.
Milan, you said you had a strong opinion on this. What do you think, mate?
Yeah, I think, the one benefit of automation, things like that, is that they don't actually need access. You get the system to manage itself in a way. So you can deploy everything, and it removes actually toil from an engineer's head. There's always a cognitive load from an engineer, and as soon as they recognize, I think there's always a learning, they believe it's going to cripple them, but the reality is once you get into the habit of saying, oh, this is truly just cattle, these are just things that I redeploy over and over again, there's a sort of comfort in that, knowing that the system will do what it's told, because, well, one thing computers are really good at is following instructions, right? Humans aren't, but a computer says no is a true thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Cool. Let's keep powering. There's still some questions here. This one's from Peter Crotty, who I believe is sitting right next to Milan. Peter asks, Chef has dabbled in and out of the pipeline, workflow, and orchestration aspects of, configuration management. What are your recommendations around this? Bring your own and integrate with Chef, or would Habitat meet this requirement? Any engineers on the call to answer that one?
So my recommendation, of course, is to utilize or leverage pipelines that you're already using within your organization. We have fantastic integrations, and the vast majority of our customers are using Jenkins. The Azure DevOps pipeline is really fantastic as well. We use that a lot. It integrates really, really well with Chef, and it has plugins for Habitat as well. A lot of our customers are now starting to use Concourse as well. Go and use the tools that are experts in the continuous delivery pipelines and leverage that with Chef, InSpec, and also Habitat for build and deploy.
Yeah, another way to think about it, Reese, is like, I think if we required one specific pipeline from us or from one particular vendor, that would be extremely troubling, right? Because our vision is to offer these immutable artifacts and this sort of orchestration approach, which will allow for that package to be delivered by your favorite pipeline vendor, right? So
use your favorite vendor, John.
Cool, cool. Let's keep moving. Hazem, no worries, our pleasure. We've got one here from TechQ1. How does Chef play in the Cloud Foundry space? Interesting question.
In the Cloud Foundry space, yeah. So in terms of the Cloud Foundry space, the best way really is to be able to build your artifacts and then be able to create them as containers that you want to be able to push out and propagate into your environment. The great thing about Habitat is that, of course, that you can create it, you can test it and run it locally on your laptop, and you can use the same heart file, the same artifact to be able to push out to any of the platforms that you have. We've got customers that use in production multiple platforms that they use Habitat to build once and deploy into multiple environments. So that would be our recommendation. Use Habitat to build and deploy your artifacts.
Yeah, there's really three vectors where you think about in a highly containerized environment where you think that Chef's product portfolio can be applicable. The first, as Anthony mentioned, is in container composition and in creating absolutely the most compact and most efficient containers humanly possible. And Habitat is a tool that's designed specifically to solve that problem. What we also see customers struggling with Cloud Foundry or whatever the container architecture of choice is around configuration management of the container infrastructure that they're operating themselves. And so that is a place where traditional configuration management can come into play, and you can use things like Chef, for example, to then manage the configuration specifics of your clusters, et cetera, and do that in a highly codified way. And then the third part, of course, is compliance. So like everything sort of leads back to compliance. And ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of what your microcompute architecture looks like, you still need to have some sense that you're adhering to standards and that applications are actually configured in the way that you thought they were. And so Inspect can be used alongside Cloud Foundry or bare metal Kubernetes, or even to check on Kubernetes containers deployed to services in some cases. So you can use Inspect as and ultimately our compliance offering to check on the validity and the compliance of the containers that are deployed and the applications that are contained within those containers as well. So there's really three vectors.
And we have a demonstration as well for container build pipelines using Inspect to ensure that they're compliant. So they'll basically fail the build of the container before it goes out to your favorite container.
Wait a minute, you're telling me that it's just because I put it in a container doesn't mean it's not secure and compliant?
I'm saying that, John, yeah.
I swear I've met so many people that drank that Kool-Aid. I'm like, it kind of matters what's in the box, right? Like just because you put it in the box, right?
Cool, guys. One more question and then we can talk. We've gone past the hour, so thank you to those that have been able to stay on. We'll get through this last question from Howard. I'll read it out. So what opportunity is there to apply Chef and its approach and tools to the industrial automation where we see IT/OT crossover? Is there a plan to make compliance applicable to endpoints that we PLC or automation of applications? Did I get that right, Howard? There's probably a lot in there.
It's more or less, I think I got the gist of it, Paul. So one of the things that we are in fact seeing is more applicability of Chef's technologies to edge cases. And I would describe industrial automation as being an edge case as opposed to core compute cases, where what we're talking about is managing large scale compute systems that live in data centers or public cloud environments, et cetera. And so we actually do have a number of customers that are doing this kind of thing already, which is applying configuration management principles for automation, applying in particular application packaging principles in the IoT space, I'll call it. And I know that IoT is not IT/OT convergence, but I'm gonna lump this all together into how do you deal with distributed compute at scale, and what are the applicable automation technologies? And what has turned out is that although we didn't design it necessarily explicitly for that, Habitat turns out to be a fantastic technology for being able to manage the life cycle of application infrastructure on the actual distributed devices. It allows you to be able to break up an application package into multiple components so that you don't have to ship an entire image at once. It allows you to do incremental updates and a bunch of other things, as well as sort of manages that underlying dependency tree. And then of course, like it seems pretty obvious, and I don't need to say it, but like compliance is absolutely becoming an issue everywhere where you have distributed compute. And so one of the beauties of the way that we architected InSpec is that not only can you run it as an on-system agent, but also in the scenarios where you're trying to attach to things like embedded Linux systems that might live in industrial applications. You can also point it there remotely and have it do a remote analysis and scan against those things. So it's admittedly early days in the industrial automation sector with respect to things like CIS profiles and CAM profiles for figuring out what is and isn't compliant. And we haven't done a lot of work on that yet, but it's certainly an opportunity that we'd be happy to partner with. And from a technology perspective, I think the technology is a really great fit for that. John, anything you want to add on that front?
That's good. I love the fact that that question was asked, because you're demonstrating that you really see that as the fundamental unit of computing evolves, like your same approach should continue to be durable and to spread to new kinds of endpoints, right? And we saw this happen from the old days, from servers to VMs, and now from VMs to containers, and and now ephemeral, like Lambda type objects and IoT. So I think the completeness of our offering will expand out as we go, and as more of our customers help us, apply those creatively. So
cool. Thank you, Howard, for the question, and thank you, folks, for the answers. I think we're done. It's 1:15 the hour. Thank you very much for those that have stayed online, which is the vast majority of folks, which is great. There must have been some interesting tidbits in there. Graham or Milan, any final words of wisdom for those on the call that you'd like to part with before we say thank you?
I'll let Milan go first.
A couple of things. I guess one thing, where if you're just starting, right, which is just start, right? Start somewhere. You won't go wrong. Start and learn. That's kind of my motto on things. Is if you plan too much, you'll never get going. So that's it. The other one is actually a question to Graham. If you have some time, I'm off on holiday for a couple of weeks, but after that, I'd love to talk to you about Cumulus and your experience with it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Cool. I'll find you.
I think what I would like to say is heading back to one of the reasons why we chose Chef in the first place. Like we assessed primarily Puppet and Chef back in the day, and the ultimate deciding factor for us was actually the supportive and amazing community in and around Chef. And if you're getting into it and you're having trouble getting started, absolutely just try something. Most of the techniques and methods that are out there and tutorials are in non-destructive environments that run in VMs, so you can just try it and blow it away. But if you're having trouble, you're in the most amazing community I think there is in and around open source software. So ask questions. There are people out there that literally want to help.
Cool, thanks, Graham. John and Corey, thank you for your time as well. I know it's the evening for you, and to Golsar, who's helping us in the background as well. John or Corey, any closing comments from the two of you?
I just want to say thanks to Graham and Milan. I always learn something every time I talk to a customer, and you didn't disappoint. So thanks for everything you're doing and being part of the Chef ecosystem and sharing your experiences.
Yeah, and Paul, thank you for having us. It's great to spend some time with the folks in the APAC region. And I'll double down is my parting wisdom. Seeing as I'm stealing his other soundbite, I'll steal Graham's closing soundbite as well, which is that this really is one of the most amazing open source communities anywhere. And there's a ton of resources available to anybody that's getting started. And so I would reinforce that it's a great place to start.
Thank you all. With that, everyone, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for giving us an hour and 15 minutes of your time today. We appreciate it. And there'll be more of these. As per the opening slides, there are a number of hands-on workshops coming up over the next couple of weeks. Can we quickly pull those slides up? Somebody Anthony, can you get those up?
Sure, I got it.
I just want the dates early in the slides. These will be hands-on workshops to look at using Chef compliance across the different cloud environments, AWS, Azure, and GCP. We've spread them out over the course of a few weeks, with 2 weeks in between thereabouts. So yeah, please have a look at the dates. Tell us if you can join us, look at the website and register for them ASAP, because they are starting to fill up. But with that, thank you everybody. We'll hit end there, I think. Cheers all.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Thank you.